The warehouse erupted into chaos. Gunfire shattered the silence like thunder, bullets ricocheting off metal containers as bodies crumpled to the concrete. Goon Yu Kang moved through the carnage like death incarnate, his tailored suit now splattered with crimson, his expression absolutely devoid of emotion. Around him his rivals fell, some screaming, others dying in stunned silence. He'd just eliminated an entire operation in under 3 minutes. A message? A declaration? An unstoppable force had arrived to reclaim what was his. As the final body dropped, Goon Yu Kang stood motionless amid the devastation, breathing steadily despite the destruction surrounding him. Blood dripped from his knuckles. His men watched from the shadows, witnessing what absolute power looked like. This was Goon Yu Kang, the man Seoul's underworld whispered about in terrified tones. The man governments couldn't touch, the man whose word meant execution. And yet nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for the woman who would challenge everything he'd built. 3 months later, the neon lights of Seoul's entertainment district painted the night in electric hues. Inside a modest establishment wedged between towering glass structures, something entirely different thrived. Sarah's sanctuary wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. The moment customers stepped through those doors, they experienced something Seoul's sterile, aggressive restaurants couldn't provide: warmth, authenticity. Seoul. The air carried the intoxicating fragrance of West African spices, jollof rice sizzling with perfectly charred edges, tilapia grilled until its skin crackled, fried yam that melted on the tongue. Sarah moved through her kitchen like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, her movements precise yet infused with passion. Her thick curls were twisted into an elaborate crown atop her head, and her mahogany skin gleamed under the warm overhead lighting. She wasn't just the owner, she was the heartbeat of this place. The visionary who'd sacrificed everything to create this sanctuary in a city that hadn't asked for it, but desperately needed it. That evening, the restaurant hummed with contented energy. Regular customers occupied their usual tables, students crowded the corner booth, couples shared intimate dinners. Sarah moved between tables with effortless grace, her smile genuine, her attention undivided. This was her kingdom, small, unpretentious, but absolutely hers. Then the temperature shifted, the entrance swung open, and suddenly the air felt different, heavier. The laughter died mid-sentence, forks paused, someone's wineglass froze inches from their lips. 5 men in impeccably tailored charcoal suits entered like they owned reality itself. They didn't walk, they commanded. And leading them, moving with the predatory grace of an apex predator, was Goon Yu Kang. Sarah had heard the whispers. Everyone in Seoul had. They said he was merciless. They said he'd built an empire on fear and bloodshed. They said entire families vanished if they crossed him. What they didn't mention was how devastatingly beautiful monsters could be. Goon Yu Kang possessed the kind of presence that made you forget how to breathe. Broad-shouldered, sharp-jawed, his black hair swept back with precision. His suit fit like it had been constructed on his body alone. But it was his eyes that paralyzed you, obsidian and cold, like twin weapons calibrated for destruction. His security team scanned the restaurant with expressions that promised violence to anyone foolish enough to stare too long. They claimed the largest booth. Goon Yu Kang sat at the head like a throne had materialized specifically for him. Sarah forced her legs to move, professional, composed. That's what she needed to be. She grabbed menus and approached, her heart performing acrobatics against her ribs. Good evening. Welcome to Sarah's sanctuary. I'm thrilled to have you with us tonight. Her voice remained steady, even as every instinct screamed at her to maintain distance from this man. Goon Yu Kang's gaze lifted slowly to meet hers. The moment their eyes connected, she felt something shift. like standing too close to a live electrical wire. His stare was penetrating, analytical, as if he could strip away her skin and examine her soul simultaneously. He didn't respond. He simply flicked his fingers in a gesture that meant, "Continue." "Our specials this evening are—" "I'll consume whatever you determine possesses value," Gunyu Kang interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper yet carrying the weight of absolute command. Sarah's stomach tightened. This wasn't a request. This was a decree. "Of course," she replied smoothly, masking her irritation. "I'll prepare something extraordinary for you." In her kitchen, Sarah's hands moved with automatic precision, but her mind spiraled. Why here? Why tonight? The entire restaurant felt like it was holding its breath. Customers exchanged nervous glances. Several looked ready to abandon their meals and disappear into the night, but none dared draw attention to themselves. When she returned with steaming plates, fragrant jollof rice with perfectly charred grains, tilapia that flaked apart with a fork, golden fried yam garnished with fresh herbs, Gunyu Kang didn't acknowledge her. He simply stared at the food as though it were a puzzle requiring solving. Then he lifted his fork, took a single bite, chewed deliberately. His expression revealed absolutely nothing. He set down his utensil carefully. Then, without warning, his hand swept across the table. The plate shattered against the floor, sending sauce splattering across pristine white tiles. Gasps erupted around the restaurant. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. Gunyu Kang's voice slid into the silence like venom. "Consider yourself honored that I permitted your creation to touch my lips." The entire establishment seemed to turn to stone. One of his men rose, fury twisting his features. "Watch your tone, woman. Know your place." But Gunyu Kang raised a single hand, and the man dropped back into his seat like a puppet with severed strings. This was how it functioned. You absorbed humiliation. You swallowed your pride. You thanked whatever deity you believed in that you survived the encounter. Sarah wasn't built for submission. Her hands curled into fists as heat flooded her face. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped forward, her shoes crunching over shattered porcelain. She positioned herself at the edge of his table, her chin elevated, her dark eyes blazing. When she spoke, her voice cut through the suffocating silence like steel. "You're going to settle that bill." The entire restaurant gasped in unison. Gunyu Kang's head tilted, his obsidian eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "What did you say?" "You comprehended my words perfectly," Sarah replied, her voice razor-sharp. "You consumed food here. You damaged my property. You don't get to humiliate me in my own establishment and walk away like you own the universe." One of his bodyguards surged to his feet, rage contorting his expression. "Disrespect will get you." "Sit," Gunyu Kang commanded quietly, and the man obeyed instantly, trembling slightly. Now Gunyu Kang rose. He moved with controlled precision, his presence suffocating, overwhelming. He advanced until he stood directly before her, close enough that she could see the thin scar cutting diagonally across his jawline. His cologne, cedarwood and smoke wrapped around her like a trap. When he spoke, his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You possess something rare," he murmured, "but fire dies when it confronts steel." Sarah's heart hammered violently against her ribs, but she refused to retreat. Her voice emerged steady, controlled. Steel corrodes when exposed to persistent water. "I wouldn't recommend discovering what happens when you test my patience." Gunyu Kang. The utterance of his complete name produced fresh gasps. Nobody spoke his name aloud. Nobody. For the first time, something flickered across his expression. Surprise, perhaps even intrigue. His lips curved into something between a smirk and disbelief. "You dare," he whispered. "I absolutely do." Her dark eyes remained unwavering. She retrieved the payment folder from the counter, scribbled the total with deliberate strokes, and positioned it directly between them on the table. That will be 32,000 Korean won. Cash or card? Your preference. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. His men stiffened, waiting. Was this woman suicidal? Did she genuinely wish to perish here tonight? Gunyu Kang studied her for an extended moment. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes burned with something unfamiliar. Not pure rage. Not simple arrogance. Something deeper. Something that looked dangerously like fascination. He didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, he stepped even closer. Close enough that her breathing became difficult. His voice transformed into something both gentle and lethal. You'll regret this transgression. Then, without another word, he pivoted and departed, his men following like extensions of his shadow. The entrance chimed softly as it closed, an absurdly peaceful sound following the violence of his presence. The moment they vanished, the restaurant erupted. Whispered conversations exploded into frantic gossip. Is she completely insane? She challenged Tae-sung directly. She's marked for death. He'll return for her. Mina rushed to Sarah's side, trembling violently. Uni, what have you done? Sarah bent down and collected the broken fragments methodically, her composure absolute despite her racing heart. What was necessary, she said simply. But as she discarded the shattered porcelain, a realization crystallized deep within her consciousness. Tonight had irrevocably transformed everything. She had challenged an emperor in his own domain, and emperors never forgot defiance. What Sarah didn't comprehend, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, was that Gunyu Kang didn't just remember defiance, he became obsessed with it. The next morning, Sarah's suppliers began cancelling. Her distributor of rice and specialty ingredients called with stammering apologies. Her beverage container supplier terminated their contract. By evening, even her produce vendor refused future deliveries. The message was crystal clear. Someone with extraordinary power had decided her establishment was expendable. The surveillance began that night. A black sedan positioned itself across the street, its tinted windows concealing the observers within. Sarah felt their attention like a weight pressing against her skin. But she refused to surrender. She cleaned. She cooked. She opened her doors each morning like her business wasn't systematically being dismantled. The retaliation escalated into violence. One afternoon, she arrived to discover her windows completely obliterated. Glass fragments covering the floor like a glittering graveyard. Her tables had been overturned, her chairs destroyed. Someone had spray-painted incomprehensible symbols across her walls in dripping crimson paint, symbols she didn't recognize but instinctively understood belonged to Gunyu Kang's underworld domain. Mina broke down into tears. We should disappear. This isn't worth our lives. But Sarah simply picked up a broom. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Stand tall, Sarah. The world bows exclusively to those who refuse to bend. With steady hands, Sarah scrubbed away the paint, replaced the broken furniture, and reopened her doors the next morning. That evening, as darkness fell and she scrubbed the final remnants of crimson paint from her walls, the entrance opened without warning. Sarah's entire body went rigid. Slowly she rotated. There, silhouetted against the street lighting, stood Gunyu Kang. Alone. No security detail. No men in suits casting shadows. Just him. And suddenly the small space felt impossibly confined. He stepped inside, his presence suffocating. He wore an all-black ensemble, his hair falling casually across his forehead, but his presence remained overwhelming. He studied the half-cleaned walls, the broken glass still piled in corners, the evidence of destruction surrounding them. Come to verify I've surrendered? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the trembling in her extremities. Not yet, he replied smoothly. His obsidian gaze swept across the damage, then returned to her face. Impressive. He stepped closer. You could have made this effortless. All required involvement was bowing your head. Sarah's chest rose and fell with measured breaths. Because this establishment represents me, I won't surrender it to anybody, especially not to you. Goon Yu Kang advanced until he stood mere inches away. The air seemed to compress. You don't experience fear toward me, he murmured. His voice carried dangerous curiosity. His eyes searched hers, analyzing, seeking something he couldn't quite identify. Maybe I do, Sarah responded quietly, but I won't permit fear to dictate my existence. For an extended moment, silence stretched between them, thick, charged, electric. Then Goon Yu Kang produced a sound resembling genuine laughter. Low, authentic, startlingly warm. You comprehend how extensively the interval has expanded since anyone dared communicate with me in that manner? His eyes never left hers. Since anyone possessed sufficient courage to stand before me without trembling? Perhaps you require individuals expressing honest perspectives, Sarah suggested. Goon Yu Kang's expression shifted. His gaze burned with unmistakable intensity. You embody extraordinary fire, he whispered. And I, he stepped closer still, his cologne enveloping her, have endured extensive coldness throughout my entire existence. Her respiration became shallow. Something shifted within her consciousness, a dangerous pull that terrified her more than his threats ever could. When he departed that evening, Sarah remained frozen, her hand pressed against her racing heart. She should despise him. Yet something profoundly different stirred within her consciousness, because she recognized with crystalline clarity that Goon Yu Kang wasn't attempting to destroy her anymore. He was systematically extracting her into his world, thread by thread, and she possessed insufficient resistance to prevent it. Days transformed into weeks. The surveillance persisted, the watching continued. Yet strangely, the destruction ceased. Her suppliers gradually returned, hesitantly at first, then with increasing confidence. Her customers slowly trickled back, uncertainty gradually transforming into relief. But every evening, when darkness fell, Sarah felt him. Watching from across the street, standing beneath lampposts, cigarette smoke curling into the night air, his obsidian eyes tracking her movements like a predator monitoring its prey. Except she wasn't certain anymore if he intended to destroy her or if she'd somehow become his newest obsession. One evening, as she closed her establishment, a man in an expensive suit materialized before her. She stumbled backward, her heart accelerating violently. "Who are you?" The man bowed slightly. "A representative from my superior. My employer extends an invitation for your company." Her stomach tightened. "And if I decline?" The man's expression remained neutral. "Subsequently, we'll wait. However, my employer demonstrates limited patience for waiting." Sarah inhaled deeply. "Tell your employer that if he desires my company, he'll come personally to request it." Surprise flickered across the man's face, but he bowed once more and retreated into the waiting automobile. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she didn't experience fear. She experienced anticipation, because she recognized with sinking certainty that Goon Yu Kang would come. And when he did, everything would fundamentally transform. He arrived exactly 1 week later. 2 black automobiles idled outside her establishment after midnight. 3 suited men emerged from the first vehicle. Sarah recognized immediately that resistance would prove futile. She possessed no escape route, no one to contact. She existed isolated within this city, and Goon Yu Kang had already demonstrated his capacity to reach her anywhere. So she climbed into the automobile without resistance, without screaming, without dramatic protests. Her chin remained elevated. Her eyes remained dry. The drive extended toward the outskirts of Seoul, stopping finally before an imposing fortress of glass and steel positioned beside the Han River. Not a flashy skyscraper designed for ostentatious display, but a defensive stronghold, a place where kings conducted business beyond the reach of ordinary mortals. The security team led her through marble corridors. Everything whispered wealth and power, the polished floors, the expensive artwork, the air of controlled danger saturating every surface. They arrived at a private chamber. Gunyu Kang sat at the head of an extended table, his suit absolutely immaculate, a glass of premium whiskey positioned within his grasp. When he perceived her arrival, a slow, predatory smile curved his lips. "You came," he said simply. Sarah's eyes flashed with fury. "I didn't possess a choice. Your men essentially kidnapped me." "Choice?" Gunyu Kang repeated, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Everything constitutes a choice, Sarah. You selected to enter my automobile. You selected not to scream. You selected to defy me repeatedly," he continued softly. "And now you're choosing to remain within my presence." Sarah's hands curled into fists. "You destroyed my livelihood. You terrorized my establishment. You obliterated everything I'd constructed simply because I demanded monetary compensation." For a moment, his expression hardened. His obsidian eyes narrowed dangerously. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned backward in his chair, amusement flickering across his features. "Do you possess awareness," he said softly, "that absolutely no individual has ever communicated with me utilizing that particular manner spanning approximately 1 decade?" Sarah's chest tightened. Perhaps that's because everyone else possesses sufficient intelligence to recognize danger. Or perhaps, Gunyu Kang murmured, rising from his seated position, they simply lack the fire you embody. He advanced toward her with measured, deliberate movements. Each step seemed calculated, each movement controlled, the air compressed around him, suffocating, overwhelming. He stopped mere inches away. His cologne enveloped her, cedarwood, smoke, something indefinably dangerous. "You captivate my curiosity profoundly, Sarah," he whispered, in a manner I've never experienced before. His obsidian gaze swept across her face, searching, analyzing. "Do you comprehend what becomes available to individuals who captivate my curiosity?" Her heart hammered violently. "They vanish." "Sometimes," he said, and his lips curved into something between a smile and a threat. "But sometimes they illuminate so brilliantly that I discover myself incapable of looking elsewhere, unable to redirect my attention, completely consumed by the necessity to comprehend them, to possess them." His voice dropped lower. "To understand what they taste like." Sarah's breath caught. Her mouth went dry. "What do you expect from me?" For an extended duration he expressed nothing. His obsidian gaze remained locked completely upon hers, unreadable yet intensely analytical. Subsequently, he descended fractionally closer, his voice transforming into barely perceptible sound. "Everything. Everything." The singular word suspended between them like a declaration of war. Or perhaps a declaration of something far more dangerous. Sarah's respiration became arrested. Her consciousness spiraled. "You cannot possess me." Gunyu Kang's expression transformed into something between amusement and lethal intent. "Cannot or decline to." "Both," she articulated firmly, her voice emerging as both weapon and shield. For the initial instance following their initial meeting, Gunyu Kang's predatory composure genuinely faltered. His expression darkened noticeably. His facial muscles contracted, yet not necessarily from outrage. From something more complex, something heavier, something resembling complete preoccupation, the kind that consumed entire existences. He didn't force her that evening, didn't contact her, didn't articulate additional threats. Rather, he permitted her liberation. His security transported her homeward, the metropolitan area continuing its nighttime quietude, her cardiac rhythm accelerating persistently throughout the entire journey. Yet, as Sarah positioned herself within her sleeping space numerous hours afterward, examining her ceiling while dawn approached, she recognized the genuine circumstance with crystalline clarity. He hadn't permitted her liberation. He'd extracted her considerably further. Because beginning that particular evening, She wasn't simply contending for her establishment anymore. She was contending for her consciousness, her autonomy, for the delicate separation between his domain and her individual existence. Plus, she recognized with absolutely certainty that adequate resistance remained insufficient. The subsequent morning, upon unlocking her establishment, Sarah discovered an arrangement positioned on her payment counter. Not traditional flowers, but magnificent blood-red orchids, the kind requiring exceptional cultivation, the kind possessing associations with passion and danger. They were extraordinary, absolutely exquisite, yet they terrified her. No communication accompanied them, no signature, yet she required nothing additional. She recognized precisely who'd transmitted them. As she examined the vegetation, her consciousness spiraled with competing emotions: fury, fascination, dread, desire. Because for the initial instant since encountering Gun Yu Kang, Sarah experienced genuine uncertainty regarding whether she despised him or if she remained frightened of her own overwhelming yearning to comprehend his affection directed towards someone resembling herself. 6 months transpired. Winter descended upon Seoul with crystalline beauty. Snowflakes drifted through the metropolitan landscape like celestial confetti. Sarah's sanctuary had flourished magnificently. Fresh furnishings, recently painted surfaces, customers experiencing sufficient courage to return consistently. Yet every evening when darkness consumed the city, Sarah detected him, watching from across the street, sometimes in a sleek black automobile, sometimes positioned beneath lampposts, a cigarette glowing orange within the darkness, his obsidian eyes perpetually tracking her movements, analyzing, studying, wanting. She'd grown accustomed to his surveillance. Strangely, she'd begun anticipating it. Her heart would accelerate when the black automobile appeared. Her breath would catch when she perceived his silhouette beneath streetlights. One evening, as Sarah secured her establishment, the temperature shifted. The usual black automobile was absent. The lampposts remained empty. Instead, Gun Yu Kang stood alone across the street, silhouetted against neon signage. Snow accumulated upon his shoulders, his black coat dusted with crystalline particles. His sharp jawline appeared sculpted from marble in the winter illumination. Their eyes connected across the distance, and Sarah's entire existence seemed to pause. Slowly, he crossed the street. His movements possessed predatory grace despite the icy conditions. When he stopped before her, the space between them felt charged, electric, suffocating, impossible to navigate. "What do you desire, Gun Yu Kang?" she articulated, her voice surprisingly steady considering her internal tempest. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, his hand withdrew something from his coat pocket. Not destructive weaponry, not threatening instruments, something enclosed in expensive black velvet material. Sarah's lips separated in shock. "You possess insufficient seriousness." "I completely do," Gun Yu Kang interrupted, his voice transforming into something raw, unguarded, absolutely authentic. "I've obliterated entire dominions for considerably less than what you've performed to my consciousness. You disrespected me. You challenged my supremacy. You damned me explicitly." And his voice trembled fractionally. "I've never required anything with such intensity as I require you as my companion." Sarah's respiration ceased entirely. The crime lord, the individual feared throughout Korean metropolitan areas, the man who'd demolished warehouses full of adversaries without hesitation, positioned himself before her upon frozen earth, experiencing complete vulnerability. Indeed, genuinely kneeling. The velvet container expanded, presenting a straightforward silver circlet. No precious gems, no elaborate ornamentation. Exclusively an uncomplicated band, authentic yet subdued, breathtakingly beautiful in its simplicity. "I'm capable of distributing riches beyond enumeration," he whispered, his attention fastened completely upon hers. "I'm capable of distributing prominence that would transform your existence. I can obliterate every individual who's examined you with insufficient reverence. Yet none of that constitutes significance if I'm incapable of possessing your genuine affection. So I'm requesting, Sarah, and Gunyu Kang had never requested anything from anybody. Don't transform into my controlled acquisition. Don't become my possession. Become my equivalent. Become my ruling partner. Become someone who'll stand beside me, not beneath me. Sarah's existence seemed to discontinue. Metropolitan reverberation diminished into background noise. Snowflakes appeared suspended within atmosphere, and exclusively her autonomous cardiac rhythm continued producing sound, rapid, intense, completely overwhelming. Gunyu Kang, her communication wavered. Do you genuinely comprehend your request's implications? I comprehend completely, he responded without hesitation. I'm unlike you. We're nothing resembling equivalent. I'm violence and darkness. You're warmth and light. I've constructed my existence upon destruction. You've constructed your existence upon creation. Our worlds shouldn't ever collide. Yet they have, Gunyu Kang continued, his voice transforming into something resembling anguish. And everything I've constructed, every dominion, every alliance, every accomplishment, means absolutely nothing without you. So if that necessitates my systematic destruction of my dominion to reconstruct something resembling yours, subsequently, I'll execute precisely that. If that necessitates me transforming into someone worthy of your affection, subsequently, I'll initiate that transformation immediately. Tears collected within her optical organs. She had opposed him relentlessly. She had cursed him repeatedly. She had resisted his existence with every fibre of her consciousness. Yet presently, he remained, selecting her, positioning himself submissively for her sake, an individual whose entire existence had been constructed upon never demonstrating submission toward anybody. Her mouth trembled as she communicated barely perceptibly. What happens if my response becomes rejection? Gunyu Kang's manifestation tightened, his expression transforming into something resembling genuine devastation. Subsequently, I'll dedicate my complete lifespan establishing my adequacy until you ultimately consent. I possess infinite patience regarding this matter. The genuineness within his communication shattered her final resistance entirely. Gradually, Sarah progressed forward, her extremities extended outward, her fingers contacting his frozen physiognomy. He shut his pupils upon her sensation resembling an individual who'd been deprived of warmth throughout eternity. Gunyu Kang, she articulated softly. You generate tremendous anxiety within me. You generate considerable irritation within my consciousness. Yet simultaneously, she managed her respiration carefully, her crystalline drops ultimately descending. You generate existence sensation I never envisioned discovering. You make me feel alive in manner that petrifies me, because I'm beginning to comprehend that I'm falling. His pupils separated, examining her countenance with desperation. Falling. Absolutely, she articulated. I'm falling for you. Yet I possess one exclusive provision. He leaned nearer, awaiting her articulation. You cultivate capacity to cherish me as your genuine equivalent, she articulated delicately, exclusively as your counterpart, not as your possession, not as your accomplishment, not as your collected acquisition. As Sarah, this feminine individual possessing her own fortitude, her own aspirations, her own narrative. Someone who'll occupy your equivalent position, standing directly beside you, not submissive beneath. For an extended moment, quietude persisted between them. Subsequently, progressively, Gunyu Kang's expression transformed completely. Not into the chilly, mocking expression she'd initially recognized, yet something genuine, unguarded, devastatingly authentic. Something resembling hope. As you desire, Sarah, he articulated softly. I'll spend my lifespan becoming someone worthy of standing beside you. He positioned the silvery circlet upon her extremity with reverent movements. The metallic band glinted magnificently underneath descending precipitation. The crime lord had when he integrated her completely within his embrace, transmitting affection with intensity surpassing any conflagration. When his lips discovered hers with desperation and devotion intermixed, Sarah experienced comprehensive realization. As snow continued descending around them, transforming the brutal metropolitan landscape into something resembling Eden, Sarah comprehended that love transcended simplistic categorization of good and evil. Occasionally, love resembled the collision of opposing forces generating something entirely revolutionary. Occasionally, the most dangerous individuals required someone brave enough to demand their transformation. And Sarah possessed that fortitude in abundance. If this dark romance left you absolutely captivated, smash that subscribe button for additional intense mafia stories that'll maintain your heart racing uncontrollably. Like this video, share it with friends who crave thrilling tales, and comment below. Would you risk absolutely everything for love resembling what Sarah did? Don't forget to activate the notification bell so you never experience missing our subsequent gripping story. Additional thrilling narratives arrive consistently. Thanks tremendously for watching.